You open the box, carry the panels outside, angle them toward noon sun, plug into your power station, and watch the input display. The kit says 400 watts. The display says 190. You tilt the panels. You recheck the cable. The number barely moves. That gap is not a fluke. It is the product working exactly as the label allows it to. Here is the core audit line. The wattage printed on the panel is the first number in a long chain, and battery input is the only number that actually matters. Every step between those 2 points costs watts, and the marketing never mentions any of them. The word lie is worth being precise about. Most panels physically produce close to their rated output under perfect lab conditions. The problem is that buyers read 400 watts and reasonably expect 400 watts flowing into their battery. That expectation is exactly what the packaging encourages, and exactly what does not happen. Those missing watts do not disappear in one place. They are shaved off stage by stage, and that is what this video traces. Here is what the listing actually sold you. A headline number. 400 watts, 200 watts, 100 watts, printed large, placed first, designed to become the purchase decision. And the human brain does a fast, reasonable translation. 400 watts. It means 400 watts charging. You saw that number and mentally mapped it to speed, to a fridge running through the night, to your phone, your lights, your CPAP machine staying alive when the grid goes down. That translation is exactly what the marketing invites. The product images show panels, a battery, and a glowing display. The copy says power, backup, independence. Nothing in the listing interrupts the assumption. Here is what the listing does not foreground. Panel watts, controller capacity, battery input rating, inverter output ceiling, and appliance starting load are 5 separate numbers. Under real conditions, they are 5 different values, and they do not stack. The panel rating is a ceiling measured in a lab. The controller clips what it will accept. The battery limits what it will absorb. The inverter caps what it will push out. And your appliance demands a surge the moment it switches on that none of those earlier numbers were sized to handle. Each number in that chain is smaller than the one before it. The listing folds them all into one buying impression and calls it a solar kit. That is the promise. Next, the first cut, and it happens before the kit even touches sunlight. The first cut happens in a lab you will never visit. Every panel rating that 400-watt number on the listing was measured under standard test conditions. 5. And a cell temperature of exactly 25 degrees Celsius. Those are the conditions that produce the headline number. They are also conditions that do not describe your roof, your balcony, your campsite, or your driveway during a blackout. A 400-watt rating means the panel can deliver 400 watts under that controlled standard. It does not mean 400 watts across a charging day. It means maximum output when everything is calibrated to produce it. Real placement subtracts from that ceiling immediately. A low winter sun angle alone can cut output by 30 to 50%, compared to a panel pointed directly at peak sun. Morning haze, high cloud cover, or urban particulates reduce irradiance below that 1000-watt benchmark without triggering any weather alert. A panel mounted flat on a van roof instead of tilted toward the sun loses meaningful output every hour of every day. A single shadow crossing one corner of the panel can drag down the entire string. None of this involves a single cable or any electronic component. This is just light hitting glass at less than ideal geometry and intensity. So the number entering the first component in your kit is already smaller than the label. How much smaller depends on your location, your season, and your mounting. But smaller is the baseline. The advertised figure is the ceiling, not the floor, and almost nobody operates anywhere near the ceiling. So the panel is already underperforming before a single wire carries current. Now add heat, and the loss accelerates 5% of their rated power for every degree Celsius the cell temperature climbs above 25. That sounds modest until you measure an actual panel in direct summer sun. Air temperature might read 32 degrees Celsius, but the cell inside the panel can reach 65 or 70. That is a 40-degree gap above the test condition. 4% per degree, you have just lost 16% of whatever the panel could deliver in cool, calibrated air. Not a rounding error. A systematic, physics-driven reduction that happens every hot afternoon. The mechanism matters here. Heat does not just make the panel warm. It lowers the panel's operating voltage. The current holds roughly steady, but voltage drops, and power is voltage multiplied by current. So the entire operating point of the panel shifts downward in a way no firmware update corrects. Angle compounds this. A portable panel propped at whatever angle fits the campsite. A rooftop array mounted flat for aesthetics. A balcony kit leaning against a railing. Each one presents less active surface to the sun than a correctly tilted panel would. The losses are not cosmetic. An angle deviation of 30 degrees from optimal can reduce output by 15% or more depending on solar elevation. Then there is shade. One shaded cell string in a series circuit does not just lose its own output, it can drag down the entire string. A tree branch, a vent pipe, a balcony overhang, any partial shadow introduces a disproportionate drop. The panel reaching your wiring is already operating below its label. Next, that reduced power has to travel through the kit's cables. That reduced power now has to travel through whatever wires came in the box. And here is where budget kits quietly take another cut. Wire carries resistance. Resistance turns current into heat instead of usable power. The voltage arriving at your controller or battery is lower than the voltage leaving the panel. That gap is voltage drop, and it scales with three things: how much current is flowing, how long the cable run is, and how thin the wire is. Low voltage systems are punished hardest. A 1-volt drop on a 12-volt circuit is an 8% loss before anything else happens. The same 1-volt drop on a 48-volt system barely registers. Kit bundles routinely include extension leads for convenience. The listing promotes panel watts. The fine print, if it exists at all, says nothing about what gauge those extensions are or how much power they bleed over 5 or 10 meters. Wire gauge is the starting inspection point. Thicker wire carries more current with less resistance. In North American gauge standards, a lower number means a thicker wire, so 10 gauge beats 14 gauge. Check what the kit actually ships, not what the panel output implies should be there. Then measure the total cable run from panel to controller. If the seller publishes no voltage drop guidance, assume they have not done the calculation. Connector quality compounds the problem. Corroded, undersized, or poorly crimped connectors add localized resistance at every junction. More junctions, more loss. Next, even power that survives the cable intact can hit another ceiling at the charge controller. The charge controller is where a lot of buyers stop reading, and where a lot of watts stop moving. Two controller types dominate the market. PWM, pulse width modulation, works by connecting the panel directly to the battery and letting battery voltage drag panel voltage down to match. If your panel runs best at 18 volts, and your battery sits at 12, that 6-volt gap is not converted into useful current. It is simply abandoned. You are operating the panel below its efficient range and paying for it in output. MPPT, maximum power point tracking, actively steps down panel voltage and converts the difference into additional charging current. That recovery is real, and on a mismatched system, the efficiency gap between the two controller types can exceed 20%. Then, here is where it gets worse. MPPT is not a blank check. Every controller and every power station solar input has 3 hard limits: a maximum input voltage, a maximum input current, and a maximum input wattage. Whichever limit the incoming power reaches first becomes the absolute ceiling. Adding more panel watts beyond that point charges nothing. The controller clips the current, rejects the excess, or simply stops accepting power outside its operating window. Power stations are especially opaque about this. The marketing lists a maximum solar input in watts. What it does not prominently say is the acceptable voltage range and the current cap. A panel string wired in series can push voltage above the input limit and damage the unit. Wired in parallel, it may stay within voltage but exceed current limits. The audit phrase here is simple. Nameplate watts mean nothing if the controller cannot accept them. Before buying, pull the panel's open circuit voltage, operating voltage, short circuit current, and operating current. Then pull the controller's input specifications. Match those 4 numbers against those limits. If the seller cannot give you both sets of data, the system is not designed. It is assembled. So you have cleared the controller. The panel is matched. The voltage fits. The current is within limits. Now the power has to go somewhere, and that somewhere is the battery. Here is what the marketing never mentions. The battery does not accept maximum current from empty to full. It accepts what it decides to accept. Every lithium battery system runs a charge curve. In the early phase, the battery management system allows higher current. As the state of charge rises, the system backs the current down to protect the cells. By the time you are pushing from 80% toward full, the battery may be accepting less than half the watts it would take at 20%. The panel output has not changed. The controller has not changed. The battery simply stopped pulling. Portable power stations add firmware on top of that. Temperature limits, combined AC and DC charging rules, and internal protection logic can all trigger independent throttling. You may see a peak number on the screen for 90 seconds while the unit finishes a protection check, Then watch it settle 40 watts lower for the rest of the afternoon. This is where the screenshot claim becomes a liability. A seller who posts a peak reading during bulk charge has told you the best possible number under the best possible conditions for a window that does not last. That is not a performance spec. That is a highlight reel. Next, once the controller takes its cut, the battery takes its cut. What remains is the number your actual load has to survive on. The fridge, the router, the CPAP. The plan to refill this battery before dark, all of it runs on whatever is left after every stage has collected its toll. So what does that toll actually cost you when the grid goes down and you are counting on this kit to matter? A buyer who sees 400 watts on the listing runs a simple mental calculation. 5 hours of decent sun, 2 kilowatt hours stored, enough to keep the essentials moving overnight. That math is clean. The delivered reality is not. With sustained input landing between 180 and 250 watts after every stage collects its share, that daily energy budget shrinks by half before a single appliance turns on. Then there is the inverter number. That 1800 watt output rating on the spec sheet describes what the unit can push out, not what the solar side can push in. Those are two separate ratings on two separate timelines. The inverter can deliver a surge. The solar cannot replenish it fast enough to matter if you drain the battery running a space heater for an hour. Appliance behavior makes this worse. A refrigerator does not draw a steady 60 watts. It starts, and that startup surge can hit 3 to 4 times the running load for a fraction of a second. A pump does the same. Routers, phone chargers, LED lights, and small medical devices like a CPAP run closer to their listed draw, which makes them far more manageable on a constrained solar budget. The mistake is planning the kit around the inverter ceiling instead of the actual charge rate, then discovering the battery is still at 30% when the sun drops. The kit can be genuinely useful. The problem is that the marketing builds a mental picture of rapid recharge and overnight coverage that the real watt delivery cannot support. Buyers do not fail because they misuse the equipment. They fail because the numbers they planned around were never the numbers the kit delivers. So here is the rule that survives this entire investigation. Do not buy from the panel label. Buy from what the system can actually deliver into the battery under your conditions. Before you spend $1, check 5 numbers. The panel's STC watt rating, which is the ceiling not the floor. The controller type, because PWM and MPPT are not interchangeable. The MPPT's voltage, current, and watt caps, because those caps eat your headroom. The cable gauge and run length, because thin long wire bleeds watts silently. And finally, real sustained charging measurements from credible user tests, not peak screenshots taken at noon in Arizona. The red flags are consistent. Any listing that adds panel watts without disclosing the charge controller's limits is hiding the bottleneck. Any listing that leads with peak output screenshots is showing you the best possible second, not a typical hour. Any listing that implies overnight backup without showing runtime math is asking you to trust marketing over physics. Use this checklist on the next solar kit listing you find. If the numbers are missing, that absence is the answer. If you find a listing you want audited, drop it in the comments and I will take a look. Subscribe if you want more breakdowns like this, and thank you for watching.